expansions. The plan had been worked up well in advance of the election, but there was no trace of it in their manifesto. We don't want Labour to get away with it this time. That's why today I'm setting out that Labour have deliberately failed to rule out 18 potential tax rises during this election campaign. In relation to each of these tax rises, Labour's manifesto deliberately makes no commitment not to raise them. If he wins, it's obvious that what Keir Starmer wants to do is cynically claim the books he inherited are much worse than he thought, as justification for imposing tax rises that he hasn't told you about. But this is disingenuous. The books are open. He can read them now. They are called the Independent OBR forecasts. So rather than hiding these tax rises, Keir Starmer should have the courage and the conviction to seek a real mandate from the British people by setting out the detail of these tax rises during this election campaign. But first, I want to remind you of our clear plan to cut taxes. Bold action that the Prime Minister set out in the Conservative manifesto published earlier this week. The next Conservative government will cut taxes at every stage of life. For younger people, we will abolish stamp duty for homes worth up to £425,000 for first-time buyers. For workers, we will take another 2p off employee national insurance, taking the total tax cut for the average worker since we began cutting national insurance to £1,350 a year. For the self-employed, we will abolish the main rate of self-employed national insurance by the end of the Parliament. For working parents, we will provide 30 hours of free childcare a week and end the single earner unfairness of the child benefit system. For pensioners, our Triple Lock Plus guarantees that both the state pension and the tax-free allowance for pensioners will always rise, with the highest of inflation earnings of 2.5%. So the new state pension doesn't get dragged into income tax for the first time in history. For motorists, we will back drivers by stopping road pricing and reversing the London Mayor's ULEZ expansion. For everyone, our more pragmatic approach to reaching net zero will guarantee no new green levies or charges for consumers while we accelerate the rollout of renewables. All reductions are paid for by controlling the growth of welfare spending by £12 billion and continuing to crack down on tax avoidance at £6 billion a year, as we've done so every year on average since 2010. Every single one of these tax cuts on work and aspiration have been opposed by Labour. And now they are going further, not just by opposing our tax cuts, but they want to put your taxes up. In stark contrast to our manifesto that cut taxes, yesterday we saw a manifesto from Labour that contained no tax cuts, only tax rises. They even warn of it in their manifesto. To quote directly, they say they will give due warning of tax and spending policies. It's a tax trap manifesto from a Labour Party that has tax rises coded into its DNA. Labour's first, second and third answer to every problem is always the same: raise taxes. And as a result, the tax burden under Labour, on their own figures, will rise to be the highest our country has ever seen. Analysis by the independent IFS show that under the tax plans in Labour's manifesto, the tax burden will rise to 37.4% of GDP in 28-29. This is higher than the level they will inherit, higher than under the Conservative plans, and higher than the historic record of 37.2% in 1948. And this means that, as we set out in the document we published today, taxes would be £58 billion higher under Labour than under the Conservatives over the next Parliament. But this calculation is just based on the formal tax rises Labour have set out in their own documents. And I'm afraid to tell you, there's more to come. Analysis of Labour's spending commitments, including 21 costings by Treasury officials, Labour's own figures, and costings from other independent sources, show Labour have a £38.5 billion black hole in their plans over the next 4 years. That will require Labour to raise taxes by £2,094 for every working family. Tax rises on top of those set out by Keir Starmer yesterday. People in this country have had an incredibly tough time with their cost of living after the shocks caused by COVID and Putin's war in Ukraine. We're just starting to turn a corner. The economy is growing, inflation is back to normal, and wages are rising. The last thing working families in our country need is Labour's £2,000 tax bill. But this tax bill is what they are going to get if the Labour Party form the next government. So, we know how much this tax bill is. We've been talking about it a lot. But the question is, which taxes are they going to raise to fit it? It's very notable, and I'm sure you've all seen, what Labour have and haven't ruled out. When we, the Conservatives, ruled out raising VAT, we noticed that Labour had not done so. And we challenged them. Why not? Within hours, Rachel Reeves herself issued a statement saying Labour does rule out raising VAT. They've also matched us on income tax and not raising employee national insurance. But that is where they have very conspicuously stopped. We openly challenged Labour to match the other tax guarantees in our manifesto. Their response? Silence. These Conservative tax guarantees on pensions, on family homes, on family businesses, on cars and on energy bills have not been matched by Labour. In fact, Labour have explicitly refused to rule these out. You've all heard the interviews. For example, we've ruled out any new taxes on workplace pensions. We've ruled out introducing new council tax bans and holding a council tax revaluation. We've also ruled out applying capital gains tax to the sale of people's main family homes, which Angela Rayner last night explicitly and deliberately failed to rule out. Think about that. For the first time ever, people's family homes would be dragged into capital gains tax. Can we be clear what this means? It would mean it would freeze the housing market because many people would no longer have the incentive to sell their home, and that would make it harder for young people to buy a family home if fewer people are selling. And most importantly of all, it would make millions of homeowners in our country poorer. It's the kind of a disastrous tax rise that makes handing Keir Starmer a blank cheque to do whatever he wants so risky for our country's future. So in summary, there are in total 18 taxes that we have specifically ruled out, but Labour won't. These are the 18 tax rises that everyone at home should expect under a Labour government. These are the 18 tax rises that we refuse to let them do quietly. These are the 18 tax rises which Labour need to come clean about. That's why our message to the British people is, if you think the Labour Party are going to win, start saving. Thank you. Thank you. Now, I'm going to take some questions. I think I've got Christian from The Express.
Hello. You'll be aware that in the days before the Prime Minister launched your manifesto, there were reports of disgruntled ministers seeking a more substantial tax cut offering in the manifesto. So given that the polls have yet to budge, if anything, they're getting worse, can you rule out any further tax cut offerings ahead of election day?
Thank you, Christian. What we have here is a substantial dividing line between us and the Labour Party, a £58 billion difference in the offer that is being put forward at this election. The Conservative Party will cut your taxes. We will cut your taxes in numerous ways. And what we saw from the Labour Party is that their only plan is to put taxes up. And that is, I think, what is going to concentrate the minds of everybody in this general election. Daily Mail.
Do you think your warnings about capital gain tax in particular will cut through to the average voter who's more concerned about the cost of living at this point in time?
The idea that Labour are secretly planning to put capital gains tax on your primary residence for the first time is a disastrous policy for families up and down the country. It's something that the Labour Party should not do in secret. they must be honest about their plans and the impact that this would have on family homes up and down the country. Telegraph.
It's just again on CGT, actually. You said in your opening remarks that it would freeze the housing market. I mean, have you done any kind of modelling on what sort of impacts that would have? And also, do you think it's possible for Labour to hit their plans on house building, which are a big part of their manifesto, if you increase capital gains tax and therefore effectively disincentivise building?
So I think this is unprecedented. What they're putting forward and the fact that they've explicitly failed to rule it out, which is really in stark contrast with what happened. And you'll all remember with VAT, they couldn't get out there quick enough to say, no, we're not raising VAT. They've just not done that on capital gains tax for primary residences. And that is extremely telling. And I do think it would be disastrous. I think most people would accept it would be disastrous for the housing market. And of course, it would put any kind of target in peril. The Times.
Hello. Both Nigel Farage and Suella Braverman have called for the two-child benefit cap to be scrapped. You're not doing that. Can you explain why you're not doing that?
So this is a long-standing policy and one which we put in place because we believe that the choices people have to make when they're on benefits should be the same as if they're in work. This is a difficult decision and not one we do lightly, but we have to manage the welfare bill in this country. And there is a clear contrast between the Conservative Party on welfare and the savings that we're going to make by controlling in a compassionate and reasonable way the welfare bill, and the Labour Party, who think that you can save £0 from controlling welfare, which I think is quite extraordinary. Sky News.
Thank you. Isn't it a bit rich for you to attack Labour on tax when your own calculations in this document you've given us show the tax burden higher in 28-29 than it is now? And if I may, shouldn't you spend more time focusing on reform, given they've just overtaken you in one poll?
So, a couple of things. Firstly, on the tax burden, look, we've been very open and honest about the fact we've had to make some really difficult decisions because of COVID and because of Putin's illegal war in Ukraine pushing up energy prices. Right? We've had to do things that we wouldn't have wanted to do otherwise. But now there's a clear choice in this election about who, going forward, is going to be cutting your taxes and who's going to put them up. And then on reform, I just want to say the Conservative Party are fighting for every single vote in this election. And look, we're only halfway through, right? Things can change. We've all seen things changing in elections. But the poll is a stark warning. If a result like this is replicated on election day, Keir Starmer would have huge and unchecked power to tax your home, your job, your car, your pension, however he wants. And we're fighting for every vote. And I know from my own conversations with voters that the choice is very clear. A vote for anyone other than Rishi Sunak and the Conservatives is a vote for Keir Starmer as Prime Minister. Chris.
Thank you. Hi, good morning. Chris Mason from BBC News. You want to talk about Labour this morning, but talk further about Reform UK. How scared are you of Nigel Farage?
Well, I think, Chris, we do need to talk about Labour because the choice of this election is clear between Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister and Keir Starmer as Prime Minister. But as I said, this poll today is a stark warning. I'm not going to underplay it. If a result like this is replicated at election day, Keir Starmer would have huge and unchecked power to levy exactly the type of taxes that we're talking about today on your home, on your car, on your job, and your business. And I think that is something that will actually concentrate the minds of everybody at home. The Sun.
Thank you very much. You've pledged to cut taxes, and Reform have also pledged to boost the personal allowance on income tax to £20,000 a year. Obviously, as mentioned already, one poll shows Reform has overtaken the Conservatives. So, two prongs to this. One, is that Reform tax plan affordable? And two, is their tax cut offering just a little bit more attractive than yours to regular voters?
So, I think in terms of Reform plans, no, they're not affordable. But crucially, as I've said very clearly, and you're going to be hearing a lot from us for the whole rest of this election campaign, if you vote for Reform, that is a vote to put Keir Starmer in number 10, and it is a vote to put your taxes up, as we laid out very, very clearly today. GB News. Hey, Chris.
Hi, Chris Hope, GB News. Two quick questions.
two. Chris, you're only allowed one.
Well, aren't Labour allowing themselves some space for their own uncertain events, like you said just then, that they have to have some way of raising money if they have to, if a black swan event happens like Ukraine, energy shock or COVID. And just quickly, the Euros start this weekend. If you're a football team, you're 4-0 down, the crowd are booing you. Isn't it time to do a deal with a striker on a rival team and get Nigel Farage to do a deal with the Tory party and see off Labour?
Just on football, I'm afraid I'm not the right person to ask, but no. And then I think more broadly on your... What was your actual other question? Sorry, I've got... You put me off with the football.
So you guys have raised taxes to deal with big
Yeah.
issues happening. Aren't they doing the same?
No, what they're doing is they are pretending in a disingenuous way that they've got to wait to see the books. The books are there, right? They're called OBR forecasts. They can look at them, right? What they are doing is secretly planning a number of tax rises which they have not got a mandate for. And that is outrageous, and we are not going to let them get away with it. Okay, and final question from ITV.
Hi there, Mahathir Basha from ITV News. You say that Keir Starmer should have the courage and conviction to be honest about the clear choice the next government will face about whether to hike taxes or cut spending. In the spirit of that honesty, which would a Conservative government do?
Well, we've set out very clearly here today how we have a plan in our fully costed manifesto to address the issues facing the country, but crucially to cut people's taxes. Right, and that involves difficult decisions. Government is not easy, but we have been transparent about those decisions. And what I'm putting to you today is the same cannot be said for the Labour Party. They are planning to raise your taxes. They are planning, by not ruling out capital gains tax on your primary home, to levy that tax. That is outrageous. It will be disastrous for this country, and we won't let them get away with it. Right, that is enough, I think, from me today. But thank you very much all for coming, as ever. It was nice to see you all, and thank you.